Some people may have seen the stream that I did of the Dianne Feinstein protest that Our Revolution Los Angeles co-organized with the Indivisible group. It was very successful in that we got Dianne Feinstein to actually come over and talk with us. For those of you who didn't see it, I did a 23-minute compilation video. It shows my short speech about Dianne Feinstein and why she needs to retire. Basically, I used 3 illustrations of how she represents the 1% and not the 99%. I was interrupted by one of the Indivisible protesters. Yes, I have a question about the Postal Accountability Act of 2006, which you signed. A lot of people signed this. No, even Henry Waxman signed this.
What happens if I don't remember it?
Well, it basically requires that the Postal Service pay employee health benefits for 75 years into the future, which has been bankrupting the post office.
Someone asked a question
and your
that's
husband's
today,
form.
please.
This is relevant today. I'm wondering if you're going to repeal this. Well, it's what our protest is about. If you would be willing to repeal this law because it is bankrupting the post office and your husband's firm is benefiting from the sale of
firm is not
his old firm. CBRE has the exclusive no-bid contract to sell or lease all the post offices.
Can you tell us about Russia? That's what people want to know.
No, people don't want to know about Russia.
Why
That's
didn't
fake news.
we have not forgotten?
This question and then we'll go to Russia.
Okay.
I don't remember the bill. I will take a look at it.
What it requires is that the Postal Service pre-fund retirement benefits for, I should say health benefits for employees 75 years into the future. These are people who haven't even been born yet. There's no other government agency or corporation, for that matter, that requires that. So the post office, which was always in the black, has been in the red ever since. And it's been forcing them to eliminate Saturday service, to eliminate rural post office, and also to close down post offices to sell or lease them to get money to keep going. And this is all in the effort so that UPS and FedEx will have the postal business and privatize the Postal Service. The connection to Feinstein is that her husband used to be the chair of a real estate company called CBRE. And that company got the exclusive no-bid contract to sell or lease the post offices. This means the Postal Service doesn't even get the best price because they don't put this contract out to bid. Richard Bloom, who's Dianne Feinstein's husband, is a billionaire. And even though he is not the chairman anymore, he still has investments in this. And he still profits from this. So this was a question that I was trying to ask Dianne Feinstein. Indivisible 29 group in the Valley blocked me from their Twitter account. I don't know if this is because I called them out for focusing on Russia, Russia, Russia. I pointed out that Indivisible is being funded by Priorities USA, which was Obama's super PAC that he set up for his re-election in 2012, and then it became Hillary's super PAC. And they raised $292 million for her election. The biggest donor is George Soros. He gave $6 million. So now, if you look on the About Us section about Priorities USA, you will see that they have shifted their mission to funding the resistance. They don't even try to lie about this. They basically use the example that the Koch brothers funded the Tea Party, and this is what they're going to be doing now. But we need to find out what the resistance is all about. And when you go on Indivisible 29's page, Twitter account, they say it's resisting the Trump agenda, period. What is your theory of change if you're just resisting something as opposed to being for something? What I wrote in my article in the LA Progressive, Fighting the Trump Agenda Locally, is how we can get Los Angeles to divest from Wells Fargo, how we can get California to adopt single payer, how we can close down the Aliso Canyon gas storage facility, and all of the positive things that we can do here in California, because that's what creates change. So when you dig deeper into what resisting the Trump agenda means, let's just go to one conference call that I was on the other day, sponsored by Indivisible. It was called the Emergency Call to Save the ACA. And it said that the purpose of the call was to stop the Trump agenda, and his number one priority was repealing and replacing Obamacare. So on the call were representatives from an organization called Families First and Planned Parenthood. Now, I asked Kevin Zeese and Margaret Flowers about Families First because Margaret Flowers is the doctor who interrupted Max Baucus's hearings on single payer on health care during the Obama administration when he was formulating the ACA. She interrupted to ask why there are no representatives of single payer there. And the reason was obvious, because they didn't want single payer because it cuts out the private insurance industry. And Obama campaigned, he said the single payer was not politically feasible, but he would have a public option. But he threw the public option under the bus in order to get the health insurance companies on board. And it was said very clearly that if Obama had supported it, it would have happened. But he didn't support it because Obama ultimately is a corporatist. That's why he didn't prosecute any of the banksters for proven fraud. Kevin Zeese and Margaret Flowers told me that Families First has been around since the 80s, and not once in the 10 years that they've been fighting for single payer has this organization ever advocated for it. So, and Planned Parenthood, as you know, supported Hillary, even though Bernie had as good, if not a better record on women's reproductive rights. Now, I support Planned Parenthood. I think what they're doing is great. But let's face it, if we had single-payer health care, we wouldn't need a private entity like Planned Parenthood to provide women's health care, prenatal care, and abortions. This emergency call went on for an hour, and these Indivisible people, they did not once mention single-payer or Medicare for all the entire time. Now, can you imagine if you had Priorities USA and George Soros and all that kind of money behind you, and you've got these chapters all over, and they're hiring, by the way, because I took Marshall Ganz's class, Leadership, Organizing, and Action at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and they sent me an email with all the jobs that Indivisible was hiring, and they are setting up chapters all over the country. And I'm not saying that the leaders of these protests are paid people, and certainly the protesters are not being paid. I want to be very clear that I am not saying that the protesters are being paid. Their goal is to basically, as they said, resist the Trump agenda with no positive program in mind. So I feel that how wonderful would it have been if they had said, call these Congress people and senators and tell them to repeal and replace the ACA with single payer, John Conyers' bill, House Bill 676, which he's been introducing every year. The state of California, the nurses union, knows that it is a winning issue, and they're taking advantage of the Trump presidency by putting forth a single-payer bill, Ricardo Lara's bill here in California, and this weekend they're having at least a half a dozen town halls for this bill. So this is what real organizers do. And yes, it is important for these representatives to be responsive to their constituents, but if they're going to hold a town hall and still vote the way they vote in favor of the 1% and not the 99%, what's the use of a town hall? If every single Democrat votes against Trump's nominees and Republicans still have the majority in both houses, then what's the use of that? So obviously what they're trying to do is build up the brand of the Democratic Party so that in 2018, Democrats regain some seats and maybe take over the House and Senate. They're also in league with the corrupt CIA, trying to impeach Trump on the basis of saying that Russia hacked the election, which has never been proven. I urge you to go to The Intercept, where Glenn Greenwald has a new article out. It's basically showing that the Democratic leaders are letting people know that the proof is not forthcoming. So after all this Russia, that Rachel Maddow's been doing every single night of her show, sometimes for the entire hour, there is no proof that Russia hacked the election. And I've been saying, if we want to impeach Trump, do it on the emoluments clause, foreign countries that are invested in his businesses. So that's how you impeach him, but you don't try to assert that they hacked the election. Now, why would they be doing that? Why would the deep state be doing that? And by the way, the deep state is a term, I first heard it on Bill Moyer's show. He is no alt-right person, okay? He is a reliable left-wing journalist and has been a progressive since, the 60s. And he had Mike Lofgren, that was his name, who was a congressional staffer, and it's the military-industrial intelligence complex. And why would they want to foment a new Cold War with Russia? Well, Robert Parry answers that question very well. He was the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist from the Associated Press who uncovered the Iran-Contra scandal in the 80s. He now edits his own publication, Consortium News, and his theory is that the deep state would like to have a war with Russia because fighting guerrilla groups like ISIS is not very profitable for them. These big weapons contractors and manufacturers need to have big missiles and submarines and whatever. I'm not a war person, but whatever kind of weapons you need to fight a major superpower like Russia. That's why we are fomenting this Cold War with Russia, which is very dangerous business because it can turn into a hot war and ultimately nuclear annihilation. I think that real activists ought to join Indivisible, and they ought to go to their meetings and try to plug them into our local fights. Basically the issue fights, because that's how we're going to win during the Trump years. You could probably find your local Indivisible group on Facebook or on Twitter, or I'm sure they have a website. I'm sure it's a very well-financed, well-put-together website that probably has chapters you could put in your zip code. So for all of you activists out there, this is my suggestion. Join your local Indivisible group and bring them into our movement.